Before you watch this video, I have a quick shout out to Toy Reviews UK. Also, please consider subscribing. It would be a great help to reach 1,000 subscribers. Mr. Gum. Now, what's for dinner, Mr. Gum? Andy Stanton. Illustrated by David Tassyman. Chapter 1. Off to the seaside. This is the story of the Battle of Le Mont-et-Bibber, or as it became known, the Dinner Time Wars, or as it didn't become known, Ghostbusters 3. And know this, my friends, it was terrible conflict indeed. Like all wars, it was full of madness and anger. Like all wars, there was courage, heroes, and dastardly villains. Like practically all wars, there was a dirty little monkey called Philip the Horror. But I know what you're wondering. You're wondering about how the Dinner Time Wars got started in the first place, aren't you? How did it all begin, you ask? What do you mean, a monkey, you inquire? Shut up, I reply. Stop bothering me with all these questions and I will tell you. It all started on a Friday. And not only did it start on a Friday, but it started with a Friday. That wonderful old gentleman, Friday O'Leary, hero of many an adventure and 3 times winner of the Le Mont-et-Bibber Women's Underpants Badminton Championship. And here's a quick word from Friday himself. Bread bin. Thanks, Friday. But hey now, don't dream it's over. This story doesn't just start with Friday O'Leary, because along with him were his good friends Polly and Alan Taylor. Now Polly was a little girl with the sort of sandy-coloured hair that makes you happy to be alive, and the sort of coloured heart which is so brave it would fight a lion if that lion happened to deserve it. For instance, if he had been trying to rob pencils, Polly was only 9, but she was a hero through and through. And as for Alan Taylor, he was a gingerbread man with electric muscles, and he was 16.24 centimetres tall, because he'd grown a centimetre since the last book he was in. Maybe I'll grow to a real man one day, he was fond of saying, but that was impossible. Or was it? Yes. But never mind. For the most part, Alan Taylor was a jolly little twinkle, and girls liked him because he was cute, and they could dress him up like a doll and make him go to tea parties. Oh, you are a darling little Marshy, laughed Polly now, bending down to kiss Alan Taylor on his juicy raisin eye. And this is going to be the best holiday ever. That's right, laughed Friday O'Leary, throwing his hat up in the air. It landed on a cloud, and the cloud laughed so hard it turned into a lovely apple. We're off to the seaside, and we won't be back for weeks. Hooray, said Polly. Huzzoo, said Alan Taylor. The truth is lemon meringue, yelled Friday, as he sometimes liked to do. It's seaside time for us. And off they toddled down the friendly road, and the sun shone down the trees, and the trees were brown, and there wasn't a frown in the whole wide world. Just Friday, a biscuit, and a happy little girl. Chapter 2. Butcher Shop Blues. Deep inside Billy William III's right royal meats, someone stood in the dismal shadows, watching the heroes go. It was that appalling butcher, Billy William III. Ha ha, ha ha, grinned Billy now. With them lot of do-gooders come down the seaside to do their sunbathing and their sandcastles, the way is clear for evil. For once me and me old pal Mr. Gum will be free to do our plans in peace, and then we'll rule this stupid town. And that's how it went in Le Mont-et-Bibber. Billy William and Mr. Gum were always trying to hatch their scoundrel plans, and the heroes were always squashing them back down. So it was no wonder that seeing Polly and her friends leaving town put Billy in a good evil mood. No more heroes any more, he sang. No more heroes any more. They walked right past me butcher's door. Now and Mr. Gum's gonna rule the roost. What's a roost? I don't even know. But who even cares on who hero's gone? And now I'm gonna sing me song. Yeah, nothing can stop us. Not even an interfering diplodocus. As Billy sang, he beat out of rhythm on the counter with a pair of chicken drumsticks. He closed his eyes and pretended he was a rock star guy called Space Age Billy and the Meat Brigade. No more heroes any more. They walked right past me butcher's door. My name is Space Age Billy, and I'm a funky man. He was number 1 in the charts, and all the girls fancied him. He was the best. No more heroes anymore. Mr. Gum and Billy's gonna win for sure. But hang on, just where was Mr. Gum exactly? Billy opened his eyes and snapped back to reality. He must have been singing for hours. It was getting dark outside. An owl flew past the window, and another owl flew past too. Then Dracula and his friend Clive walked by there on the way to the pub. It was night time, but still no Mr. Gum. That's funty, said Billy. You see, that was how Billy William pronounced the word funny. Mr. Gum always comes here for his Friday night dinner. He loves feasting on the entrails on stale burgers, like what I feed him. In all these years, he ain't never once been late. Billy's pet flies buzzed around his head, picking at the tiny morsels of meat he kept in his ears for their treats. The clock on the wall ticked. Billy waited patiently, but inside his heart was slowly sinking like a battleship, until finally he had to admit Mr. Gum wasn't going to show. Well, that's it. I can't wait no longer, yawned Billy, his butcher's cap drooping wearily in the gloom. There's nothing for it to shut up shop and call it a night. I don't get it, said Billy, as he tucked himself into his freezing cold bed. A whole town to muck up and no Mr. Gum to muck it up with. It ain't no fun doing plans on me own. Billy looked up at the poster on the wall. It was his secret joy. It was a pin of Tara Gruntwinkle, the butcher queen of all London town. She was holding a meat cleaver dripping with guts. Imagine if you and me was married, Thora. Me darling, said Billy. Then I wouldn't be lonely no more, and I wouldn't need no Mr. Gum either, he added spitefully. Billy blew out his bedside candle, and soon he was fast asleep, sucking his thumb and dreaming of punting downstream with Thora Gruntwinkle at his side, feeding her chicken livers and gently stroking her long red fingernails. Chapter 3. Billy on the Trail. Another lonely night down at the butcher's. The flies buzzed lazily through the murk. Billy sat with his feet on the counter, staring up at the clock. 7 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock. If only I could tell the time, thought Billy, then at least there'd be some point staring up at that clock. But he couldn't, and that's what happens if you bunk off school like Billy. So watch it, children. Well, sighed Billy, as the evening wore on. Looks like Mr. Gum ain't coming in tonight neither, the lousy stinking. Hey, there he is, he cried suddenly. Me best pal in the whole world that I'd never say a bad word about. He's back. And yes, there was Mr. Gum now, creeping along the high street in his hobnail boots. His big red beard blazed like a beacon in the twilight. His bloodshot eyes darted cunningly around, looking for trouble. His dusty jacket flapped out behind him like a bad wizard's cloak, and he was licking his lips greedily. He wanted the scoffs. And I'm the one to give him them scoffs, grinned Billy. I'm going to feed him up like a champion. Everything's back to normal. But that's where Billy was wrong. Mr. Gum walked straight past Billy William III's right royal meats. He crossed over the road, kicked a beer can at a nightingale, and disappeared round the corner. Billy did a thought. Then, without a second thought, he slunk out of the butcher's shop, taking care to keep the shadows and not to yell out things like, "Hey, Mr. Gum, I'm following you." Billy crept after his horrible old pal. "Shabba me whiskers," he heard. Mr. Gum muttered up ahead, "I'm going to be late for dinner." Oh, Billy nodded to himself. Late for dinner, is it? I knew he was up to something. But what? It's a mystery. You see, that was how Billy William pronounced the word mystery. Mr. Gum picked his way through the quiet streets, his hobnail boots clumping on the cobblestones, and behind him rode Billy William on his magic unicorn, Elizabeth. "Hang on," frowned Billy. "I ain't got no magic unicorn called Elizabeth." Mr. Gum picked his way through the quiet streets, his hobnail boots clumping on the cobblestones, and behind him crept Billy William, There was no magic unicorns in sight. By now, Mr. Gum had come to the stone steps that led down to the old canal. Mr. Gum did a big crafty look and went tiptoeing down the slimy steps. Billy did an even craftier look and went tiptoeing after him, and Mr. Gum did an enormous crafty look and went tiptoeing along the canal towpath. Billy did an even bigger crafty look, which was so large it didn't even fit on his face. But somehow he managed it, because that's how determined he was to look craftier than Mr. Gum. The two bad men tiptoed along the canal, the dirty water lapping softly in the evening breeze. Many years ago, the canal had been a glorious waterway transporting over 90% of all England's emails down to Cornwall. But in these modern times, all the email transportation was done over the internet, and no one used the canal anymore, except to dump shopping trolleys in. The water was brown and useless. If you drank it, you would die, and I should know, because I drank it once, and I died. But now a new smell came to Billy Williams' long nose. Above the stench of the stagnant brown water, it was the smell of old cooking oil and cheap fat. And suddenly a cold chill passed him as he realised where Mr. Gum was headed. "No," whispered Billy, "it couldn't be. It's too upsetting even to imagine." But there it was, a fizzing neon sign which blinked and buzzed in the darkness like a sinister fig. Greasy Ian's House of Slops. Chapter 4. Greasy Ian's House of Slops. "No," whispered Billy as Mr. Gum approached the buzzing neon sign. Despite what he was saying, Billy prayed he was wrong. Surely Mr. Gum wasn't really going to eat his dinner elsewhere. Surely he wasn't really going to eat it at the dirtiest kebab shop known to man or beast. Greasy Ian's House of Slops. Billy watched as Mr. Gum stole one last glance around him, then swift as a crab, the sneaky old beardy crawled in through a little cat flap set into the rusted metal door. Billy crept onto the window as close as he dared. He had known for sure. "Oi, Greasy Ian," Mr. Gum was yelling now. "I wants me dinner, and I wants it quick smart." Billy looked as the man behind the counter turned slowly around. He was a terrifying bulk of a fellow with boils all over his face and brains. There was a long scar on his left arm from his days as a barbed wire salesman, and one of his hands was made of brass after a terrible accident involving a chainsaw, some superglue, and a brass hand. So Mr. Gum grinned. Greasy Ian, beads of sweat rolling down his blotchy purple face. "I knew you'd be back. Once you've had one of me doner kebabs, you're hooked for life." "It's true, Greasy Ian," laughed Mr. Gum. "I've been thinking about them all week. The meat, the sauce, them little polystyrene boxes you puts them in that ruins up the environment is driving me mad, and I gotta have some more, less. I mean more." "Well, you're in luck, you big dribbling demon," leered Greasy Ian. "I'm cooking up a storm tonight." "So what'll be? The usual Aye, agreed Mr. Gum. "A blimmin' enormous kebab dripping with tons of grey sauce, so it got all over me clothes." "Coming right up," said Greasy Ian. He twirled his carving knife and began hacking into the enormous slab of meat that was turning slowly on the spit behind him. And who was turning the spit? Yes, it was that monkey I told you about earlier. "Philip the Horror!" gasped Billy William outside. So the rumours was true. He really does exist. And what a dreadful little beast that monkey was. His eyes were filled with a terrible intelligence, which was almost human, and his tail was filled with whatever monkeys' tails are filled with. He wore a scrappy little t-shirt, but no trousers, because he enjoyed letting his little farts out so much, and he turned the spit. He jumped up and down, chattering in the language of monkeys. "Faster!" growled Greasy Ian, as he sheared off long grey curly strips of meat. "Faster, Philip, faster!" Chatter, 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 cried Philip the Horror, as he turned the handle faster and faster and faster. Yet chatter, chatter, chee. And as Billy William gazed through the window, great billows of steams rose in the shop, and Greasy Ian's face was grinning through the haze. And the flames rose higher, and the meat whizzed round, and the flames rose higher, and the meat whizzed round, and the flames grew higher, and the meat whizzed round, and round, and round, and round. The meat turned round, and the monkey chattered. Down at Greasy Ian's, that was all that mattered. The monkeys chattered, and the meat turned round, and Mr. Gum laughed to hear that sound. And the chip fat bubbled at the night was on fire, with Mr. G's kebab desire. And the night was on fire, and the chip fat bubbled, and Billy's vision blurred and doubled. Chip, 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 chop, 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 down at Greasy Ian's house of slops. Chatter, 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 chee, just like hell, hell where the devil will be. Slash, 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 slice, 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 Greasy Ian's carving knife. Chatter, 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 chee, Mr. Gum's Greasy Ian and the monkey makes three. The knife's blade flashed, and the meat was sliced, and carved and halved, and chopped and diced. The meat was sliced, and the knife's blade flashed, and the pots were clattered and crashed and bashed. And the walls were dripping, and the chips were hot. Greasy Ian did a poo in the cooking pot. And the chips were hot, and the walls were dripping, and Philip the Horror was dancing and skipping. Bash, 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 bam, 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 Greasy Ian's carving up the lamb. Chatter, 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 chee, and they danced in the flames so wild and free. Flicker, 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 flame, 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 kebabs were Greasy Ian's game. Chatter, 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 chee, just like hell where the devil will be. Finally, the display of terrible cooking, was at an end. Philip the Horror eased up the handle, and gradually the column of spinning meat slowed down, coming to a stop with a soft squelchy puff. There you go, Pally, said Greasy Ian, slapping the kebab into something that was either a bit of pita bread or an oven glove. It was impossible to tell. Delicious, mumbled Mr. Gum, his gobs of sauce squirting out the side of the kebab and running down his beard in a thick, juicy stream. Never seen him looking so happy, thought Billy. Never once in all these years. Mumph, scoffle, yub, snorted Mr. Gum, cramming the last of the kebab down his throat. What a taste! Much better than Billy's boring old entrails. Outside, Billy clutched his heart as if wounded by a dagger, with disloyalty written on the handle. What? Said Greasy Ian. You're not still hanging around with that butcher fella, are you? Nah, I don't need Billy no more, laughed Mr. Gum, talking with his mouth full. Not now I got you, me old grizzler. That's right, chuckled Greasy Ian. You don't need to hang around with losers like Billy William, when you can hang around with losers like me and Philip the Horror. We're ye best friends now, eh? Aye, said Mr. Gum. And then two of them were laughing together through the smoke and the steam, and Philip the Horror was hooting and clapping his monkey paws together, and that was it. Billy couldn't stand it a second longer. He pushed open the cat flap and burst into the kebab shop on his magic unicorn Elizabeth. No, not his magic unicorn Elizabeth. Billy! Cried Mr. Gum, hastily wiping his beard on his sleeve. What you doing here? The question is, what you doing here, Mr. Gum? Cried Billy. You gone and found yourself another scoff merchant, haven't you? Hasn't you? No, I never, protested Mr. Gum. It ain't how it looks, Billy. You gone on your mind with jealous thoughts. Forget it, sobbed Billy. I seen it all. You scoffed that kebab down like a common werewolf. I seen it all, Anne. I heard it all, Anne. I smelt it all. I'm sick of you and your lies, Mr. Gum. You ain't nothing but a cheating, deceitful, pinched-up little scooper. But, started Mr. Gum. No buts, said Billy. He pointed a trembling finger towards Greasy Ian and Philip the Horror. You got your new mates now. Well, I hope the three of you is going to be very happy together. And with that, Billy William dived back through the cat flap and took off into the night, hardly knowing where he was going, and hardly caring that he didn't know the hardly way he was even going, and that he didn't care, hardly caring that he didn't know. Chatter, chatter, chatter. Philip the Horror's shrieks chased Billy all the way along the canal, echoing off the flagstones. Chatter, 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 chee. Chapter 5. Billy sows the seeds of the revenge. I never thought I'd say it, but poor old Billy, all night long, he tossed and turned in his freezing cold bed, his gruesome little head a-spinning and a-sparking with the terrible things he'd seen and heard. Greasy Ian's wild, sweaty face. Philip the Horror's gut-wrenching squeals. Mr. Gum's jaws sweeping down into the kebab meat. No! Yelled Billy, throwing the blanket to the floor. Thora Gruntwinkle looked down from her place on the wall. But what help was she? She was mere ink and paper. The real Thora Gruntwinkle was all the way down in old London town, probably kissing some big handsome sailor right now, or a guy with loads of money. Why would she want a loser like Billy? I'm alone, howled Billy. Alone! As the night wore on, Billy's thoughts grew darker and darker still. It's all Mr. Gum's fault, he growled. He's the one that deserted me. Mr. Gum, it is his fault. Desert's fault. Breath in Mr. Gum. The word went spinning around and around in Billy's mind until finally one dreadful word repeated over and over in huge blood-red letters. Revenge. You see, that was how Billy William pronounced the word revenge. I'll show Mr. Gum he can't go, won't get new pals and leaving me all alone, he vowed. But how? I wish I was a shark, then he'd be sorry. I'd lie in the ocean waiting for him to go on holiday, and then snap. That'd learn him. But Billy had to face it. He wasn't a shark, not even a little one. Finally, as dawn was breaking, an idea came to him. That's it, exclaimed Billy William. I ain't a shark, I'm a genius, a blibbering genius. But I'm gonna need 3 things, some seeds, some more seeds, and a few more seeds, just to make sure. 1 week later, Mr. Gum was sitting in his garden, relaxing on his favourite broken deck chair and reading a copy of the History of Kebabs, which Greasy Ian had lent him. Mr. Gum hated reading, but he liked the pictures. One of the pictures showed a small boy crying because he'd eaten too much chili sauce. Another showed a vegetarian being attacked by doner kebabs. It made Mr. Gum laugh. The sun was shining merrily in the sky, and the birds and squirrels were playing happily in the trees. But despite all this, Mr. Gum was in a good mood. He said, licking some old sauce off one of the pages. But then he noticed something on the lawn, something yellow and green, and Mr. Gum's tongue stopped mid-lick. He looked around. Come to think it, the garden was full of the things, dozens of them. Shabba me whiskers, yelled Mr. Gum, jumping out of his deck chair. Like horrid stallions, shabba me kebab chopping whiskers. Mr. Gum's lawn was infested with hundreds and hundreds of his old enemies. Corn on the cob. Mr. Gum couldn't stand corn on the cob. Mr. Gum hated corn on the cob. You know how kryptonite makes Superman throw up all over his cape and go really weak and that? That's almost what it was like with Mr. Gum and corn on the cob. Yisp, he moaned feebly, falling to the ground. Throob, Vastrich, put. I can't bears it. I can't stand it. I can't takes it. I can't endures it. I can't stomach it. I can't help it. I don't like it. Mr. Gum began crawling towards the house. His head was swimming and his stomach felt like it was playing table tennis. Gotta keep going, he gasped. Gotta get away. Eventually, he made it inside and up to his dirty bedroom, where he lay panting in his unmade bed, where he finally recovered. He risked a look out of the broken window, and suddenly all the strength and fury rushed back into his body. The corn on the cob had been planted to spell out a message. No one messes with Billy William III. "Who did this?" screamed Mr. Gum. Then he realised it was probably Billy William III. "That's right, you appalling snocklehead," called Billy at the precise moment, sticking his nose over Mr. Gum's garden fence. "I planted 'em, and why? To get me revenge. You ain't me friend no more, Mr. Gum. Just consider yourself lucky I ain't no shark." And off he tore down the road on his magic unicorn Elizabeth. No magic unicorn Elizabeth. Laughing. "I'll get you," said Mr. Gum in capital letters. "Just you wait, Billy, me boy. Just you wait and seize." Chapter 6. The Instant of Billy and the Flies. That crafty old gunster waited till the sun had set, and thud! Night had fallen. Then off he skiffled to Billy William III's royal mighty meets. Carefully he hid himself outside the butcher's shop and lay in wait. Where did he hide? I don't know, because he was hidden. Eventually, the lights in the butcher's shop went off. Soon after, there came the sound of Billy snoring. Ay. You see, that was how Billy William pronounced zzz. Mr. Gump tiptoed over to the shop door on his hands and knees. Then he took a large cardboard box from under his hat. He took off the lid and poured the contents through the letterbox. "Feast well, me little legitties," whispered Mr. Gum, his eyes blazing in the darkness. It was starting to rain, but Mr. Gum didn't care. He liked the rain. It proved that evil was afoot. The next morning, Billy got up. Like every other morning, he gave the poster of Thora Gruntwinkle a delicate little kiss. Like every morning, he shuffled into the bathroom to stick extra stubble on his chin and to unbrush his teeth. And like every morning, he went downstairs to feed the hundreds of pet flies who lived in his shop. "Who wants some grub?" Billy called to his pets as he landed heaps of slimy entrails into a big black bucket. "Henry, Lisa, Wendy, come and get your breakfast." But the familiar buzzing sound was not to be heard. The butcher shop was eerily quiet. "Where you all hidden?" laughed Billy. "Jasper, Vernon, Uncle Wayne, Bunk, McNulty." "Silence, Jolliper, Kenton, Crow Daddy, Stan, Nora, Oliver, Bluetail," called Billy, desperately landing the entrails into the bucket. He was starting to sweat. Something was wrong. A single fly crawled weakly towards Billy. Across the dirty sawdust floor. It was Billy's favourite of them all, a tiny fellow called Little Billy. "But just look at you," cried Billy William. The ladle dropped from his hands and clattered into the bucket. Little Billy, what's happened to you?" Billy William leaned forward to gather the poor little fly into his arms. One of Little Billy's legs was missing, and his beautiful tiny eyes were shining with fear. "Help me," he seemed to say, as he staggered forward to Billy William, who was like the father he had never had. "Help me." But before Billy could take the stricken insect in his arms, the floor started to heave and rumble, and suddenly an enemy of fat brown spiders, who had been lying hidden in the sawdust, reared up and pounced upon Little Billy. The tiny floor fought with all its might. He fought with the strength of 10 flies, but unfortunately the 38 spiders fought with the strength of 38 spiders. He didn't stand a chance. And now Billy knew where all the other flies had gone. He fell to his knees and sobbed. "Why?" he wailed. "Why?" Outside, the rain was falling like Billy's own teardrops as he lay there in the sawdust, and the wind, it blew as the cold feeling in Billy's heart. And the 3 faces stood outside the rain and wind, smiling grimly through it all. Those spiders weren't a treat, growled Mr. Gum, as Philip the Horror gathered them back into the box to eat later. Oi, said Greasy Ian, in the raindrops slipping slickly off his oily hair. Chatter, 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 shrieked Philip the Horror, jumping furiously up and down in the puddles. In each of his bright little eyes was reflected the pathetic figure of Billy William, sobbing into the sawdust. Chatter, 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 chee. Chapter 7. The Dinner Time Wars. And now do you see how the tiniest disagreements spiral out of control? Do you? Do you? Do you really? Do you? Oh, really? Do you? Do you really? Well, okay then. You see, just as the tiny acorn must one day grow into a mighty elephant, Mr. Gum and Billy's fight had grown bigger and bigger by the hour, and the incident of Billy and the flies had pushed it over the edge. It was a war, and spells trouble. So hide your head in shame, my friends, for Lamont Bibber's darkest days are now upon it. The dinner time wars had begun. Kaboom! Entrails and kebabs scrappings flew through the skies as Mr. Gum and his new pal slugged it out with Billy William III. Kablam! Pig skulls and sheep bones littered the war-torn ground. The streets ran red with chili sauce. Kabloom! A news reporter tried to sneak it in with a helicopter, but Greasy Ian got him with a pickled egg right between the eyes, and he went home and cried to his mum. Kablimo! By the day, the sun was hidden behind the clouds of oily smoke. By the night, the sun was hidden because it was night time. The townsfolk hid in their houses, and the days grew dark, for the ghastly demon war stalked the earth, my friends. War, war, war. The entrails soared up, and the fat it splattered. In the dinner time wars, that was all that mattered. The fat is spattered, and the entrails soared. As the demon of war, it rumbled and roared. Boom, 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 bang, bang, bang. Billy fighting the kebab shop gang. Chatter, 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 chee. Just like hell where the devil will be. Fire, 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 fat, fat, fat. One of Billy's burgers hit a passing cat. Chatter, 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 chee. The 3 against 1 and 1 against 3. And the fight flared, and the sky turned black. Greasy Ian accidentally nicked his monkey in the back, and the sky turned black, and the fighting fled, and the people of the town were running scared. War, 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 woo, woo, woo. Run, Billy, run, they're after you. Chatter, 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 chee. Mr. Gum squirting sauce at a sycamore tree. Bubble, bubble, bubble. Boil, boil, boil. Greasy Ian's out of the oil. Chatter, 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 chatter. No, that monkey again, cried Martin Laundrette, who ran the laundrette. I can't take it any more. Big fat Jonathan Ripples ducked as a chicken came hurtling across the sky. I used to dream about flying food, he trembled, but not like this. Innocent people are getting hurt, cried innocent people. Ouch! Kaboom! Billy launched a frozen turkey high into the air. Kebab! Greasy Ian rumbled a drum of flaming chip fat down the high street. Calor! Mr. Gum's laugh echoed off the gravy-splattered buildings. I've lived through 8 world wars, declared old Granny, taking a sip from the bottle of sherry she always kept hidden in her hair. But I've never seen anything as bad as this. We've got to get out of town. The townsfolk huddled to their houses, awaiting their chance to escape, and all around the meat flew, thick and fast. Kaboom, kablam, end of chapter. Chapter 8. The Hero's Return. Friday O'Leary looked at the calendar. He always wore around his neck. Well, he said, we've been at the seaside for days now. Do you think it's time to go home yet? Yeah, said Polly. "Let's go home to good old Lamont Bibber and see what's been happening while we've been away." "Definitely," agreed Alan Taylor, who had been chased down by the beach by violent apes for some odd reason. "I've had enough of the seaside." And so it was that the three heroes packed up their bags and set off for home. Soon they had left their seaside far behind and were making their way along the winding country lanes. The day was warm and pleasant, and the three friends walked in compassionable silence, as if no words were needed between them to communicate the things they felt. "The words are needed between us to communicate the things we feel," said Friday. The trees twittered and the birds waved gently in the breeze. But as the heroes drew closer to home, Polly began to grow uneasy. It was quiet, much too quiet. Something didn't feel right. Much too didn't feel right. "Look," Polly said, as they came as old Granny's house on the edge of town. Old Granny done pulled her curtains shut. I never seen that before. Usually she's far too drunk to remember, and everyone can see her jiving to her old-fashioned musicals in the lounge." All the other houses were just the same. Every one of them stood silent and still. There wasn't a soul to be seen. "It's like a ghost town," thought Polly with a shiver. "Where has everyone disappeared to?" thought Alan Taylor with a shiver. "Why's everyone shivering? I'd better shiver too," thought Friday with a shiver. Suddenly, whoomp! Something sharp and pointy flew through the air. Then whoomp! Something else sharp and pointy flew through the air. Then kerfurtle! Something else sharp and pointy flew through the air. "I wonder why the last one went kerfurtle instead of whoomp," said Friday O'Leary. "Isn't life interesting?" "I'll tell you what else is interesting," said Alan Taylor, examining the flying things closely with his knowledgeable raisin eyes. "These are sheep bones." "But what on earth—" "A duck!" yelled Polly as the dead duck came soaring towards them. "What's a-going on in our pretty little town? And that's a chatter-chatter-chatter-chee sound what's scrambling up me brains like dandelions." The frightful noises grew louder as the heroes rounded Boasters Hill and approached the High Street. "Oh," said Polly. "My," said Alan Taylor. "Good," said Friday. "Lord," added a helpful passer-by to finish the sentence. Because there it was all in its grisly splendour, the dinner time wars that were tearing the town apart. "Take that!" Greasy Ian shouted, a scrawny figure who stood in the middle of the High Street, lobbing meat wildly in all directions. His clothes were tattered and torn, his cap had gone, his face was covered in scraps of bacon, but Polly recognised him instantly. "Why, it's Billy William III, she gasped. "But what in the name of Billy William III is he up to? And who in the name of Greasy Ian is Greasy Ian?" Suddenly a monstrous fellow covered in boils and chip fat jumped out of an alleyway and began issuing commands. "Turn the spit, Philip, my hairy treasure. Turn the spit like you've never turned it afore. Chatter-chatter-chee!" shrieked a stinky little monkey at his side, and leaping on top of a huge kebab, the vile creature began handling the handle for all he was worth. Slip! Hot fat rained down upon the High Street. Billy William helped and went running for cover back to the butcher's shop. But when he opened the door, who was lying in wait but Mr. Gum? "Mr. Gum!" shouted Polly, rushing into the midst of the battle without a care for her own safety. "I knowed you'd be mixed up in all this. Just you and Billy leave that bloke with the monkey alone, you troublemakers." "What you on about, you stupid little girl?" laughed Mr. Gum as he swigged on a can of beer. "Greasy Ian and the monkey are on my side. It's Billy I'm after." "Billy!" exclaimed Polly in astonishment. "But I don't thought Billy was your friend, your only friend in the whole wide world." "Times change, little girl," growled Mr. Gum, brushing her aside like a horse flicking a raisin into space. "Me and Greasy Ian's gonna mash you up, good and proper." "Say your prayers, Billy, my boy," Mr. Gum cackled. Billy gritted his teeth. There had to be a way out of it. Had to be. But no, it was the end of the line. In front of him, Mr. Gum in his hobnailed boots. Behind him, Greasy Ian with his heavy iron saucepan. To his left, Philip the Horror with a ladle full of chili sauce. To his right, a quite scary ant sitting on the pavement. Escape was impossible. The sun had disappeared behind the clouds. The kebab shop gang were closing in. The ant waved its front leg menacingly. "We have to stop them," cried Alan Taylor from Polly's skirt pocket. But before they could think how, a pair of strong, hairy monkey arms grabbed them in from behind and pinned them tight. "Chatter, chatter, chee!" squeaked Philip the Horror into Polly's ear. "Friday, Friday, help!" shouted Polly, but it was no use. Friday had accidentally fallen asleep in a hedge. And now Polly and Alan Taylor could only look on as Mr. Gum and Greasy Ian advanced. The terrified butcher. Greasy Ian rolled up his sleeve. Mr. Gum raised his fists. Philip the Horror bared his yellow teeth. The ant growled. "It's all over," spluttered Alan Taylor, words muffled beneath the monkey's paw. "It's the end of society as we know it." But no. Hold everything. Stop right there. Because suddenly every molecule in Polly's body began to tingle as if some marvellous mystical music was playing deep inside her intestines. And into the fray stepped a small boy with a face so honest and true that everyone stopped what they were doing and stood rooted to the spot. "It's the spirit of the rainbow," cried Polly, when at last she could speak. "He's come to the end. This terrible war's once and for all." Chapter 9. Only love can save us now. "Warmongers," said the spirit of the rainbow, gazing up upon the villains with his bright clear eyes. He didn't speak loudly, but nonetheless it seemed as if the whole world was hanging on all of his words. "Warmongers," he cried, "warmongers." Then he shook his head sadly and said "warmongers" a few more times. It was very dramatic. Also, once he said "war monkeys" instead, and the Philip the Horror fell silent. "Warmongers, you have brought fighting and destruction to the streets of this town," said the spirit of the rainbow. "But now you must turn from your madness, for war is cruel and heartless. Mother and her only children are misery and bloodshed, and some explosions. Turn on from your madness. While there is still a chance now, leave this place." "Shabba me whiskers," growled Mr. Gum, but nonetheless he was afraid of the honesty in the young lad's voice, and for now all the fight had gone out of him. "Come on, Greasy Ian, let's get out of here," he muttered. "Not 'cause I'm scared of that kid, just 'cause I don't feel like fighting any more, that's all." Oh, and so the villains began collecting up their weapons for another day. The kebab shop gang disappeared back to Greasy Ian's by the canal, and Billy and his magic unicorn Elizabeth, no magic unicorn Elizabeth, returned to his butcher's shop to sulk like a rabbit for the rest of the afternoon. The town was silent once more. "Oh, Spirit, you done it, you stopped the war," said Polly, tears of gratitude spilling from her eyes. "No, child," said the spirit of the rainbow, though he was no older than she. The warmongers will be back at it tomorrow. I cannot hold them off forever. War is too strong, even for me and my remarkable powers. But there is no one to force, which is stronger still, and that force is called love." "But how can love stop the war?" asked Friday O'Leary, scratching the spirit of the rainbow's head in puzzlement. "There's no way I'm kissing Mr. Gum, if that's what you're thinking." "No," said the boy solemnly, "though I do have a task for you and your friends. You see, Mr. Gum and Greasy Ian will never be stopped, for badness flows deep inside their veins. But Billy, I believe Billy can still be turned from the wickedness." "But how, Spirit, how?" said Polly. "Billy is only frightened because he is lonely and jealous," replied the spirit of the rainbow. "If we can turn his mind to thoughts of love the fighting will stop and the world will start once again." "I sees," said Polly, nodding slowly. "So we got to find Billy a wife." "Not just any wife," said the Spirit of the Rainbow. "For long ago Billy pledged his heart to a lady, and ever since that day Billy has lived in hope, and now it's time to make that hope come true." "But who could Billy possibly ever love?" asked Friday. The Spirit of the Rainbow handed Polly a photo. "Her? That's the woman Billy loves," said Polly in disbelief. "Billy is a proud man, and a smelly one," replied the boy. "He could ever only love a butcher as skillful as her. Thora Gruntwinkle is her name. She is the butcher queen of all London town." "How do you know all this?" asked Alan Taylor, who hadn't said anything for a while. Some of it is written in the stars," replied the young lad, gazing into the distance, as if seeing things there that more mortals could not. "Some of it had been foretold in the mighty prophecies of Bastos, and some of it I just make up as I go along. Enough questions. You must travel to London. Do not tarry." "I don't suppose you'd like to come with us," said Friday hopefully. "No, my friend Colling's having a bowling party tonight," said the strange boy. "Now go. The next train leaves in an hour. Bring back Thora Gruntwinkle before it's too late." And throwing them a handful of fruit juice, he was gone. Chapter 1. Meet Mr. Flamingo. "Hello, do you know who I am?" "I do, because I'm me. I'm Mr. Flamingo, and I'm absolutely splendid. Guess how many fish I can catch in one day?" "Loads. Also, look at my beak. It's tremendous. And if that weren't already enough, look how brilliant I am at standing on one leg. It's no wonder everyone around here thinks I'm superb. I am. The other thing is, I'm very pink. And what do you think of that? I think it's marvellous. Do you know why I'm so pink? It's because of all the little shrimps I'm eating all day. The little shrimps have got so strange chemicals in them, which makes pink, and those strange chemicals make my feathers pink too. Isn't that something? Also, have you met my wife? Her name is Mrs. Flamingo, and she's very attractive. All the other flamingos totally wanted to marry her, but I soon put a stop to that by kicking them in the water and jumping up and down on them until they know who was boss. Then, after everyone knew who was boss, me, I went up to Mrs. Flamingo and said, 'See who is the strongest and the most attractive. It is me.' And Mrs. Flamingo, who was just called Miss Flamingo back then, agreed, and soon we were married in the church of the Golden Hippopotamus, down by the mud flats. It's great being married. You should try it sometime. We've been married for nearly 9 years now, and in all that time we've hardly ever argued, and we've got 2 lovely children, Michael and Penny. So anyway, now you've met my family, it's time to tell of the time the rhino came to town. It was a lazy Saturday afternoon, and I was idly preening my beautiful feathers. Dear readers, we have just been informed a disastrous printing error in what's for dinner, Mr. Gum. Apparently, thousands and thousands of copies have been mistakenly printed with a chapter about a flamingo instead of a chapter about going to London on a train. If you have been a victim of one of these flamingo copies, please visit www.eggman.co.uk/missing-chapter, where you can read the correct chapter as nature intended. Yours sincerely, Mr. Egmont. Mr. Egmont, the publisher, and his wife, Mrs. Egmont. Chapter 11. Old London Town. "I never done been in a big city before," said Polly, as they stepped off the platform into the crowded railway station. "Look at all the shops. There must be at least 6 of them, and that's just the station," replied Friday, who was a great traveller. "In actual fact, what a marvel it is," said Polly, her eyes goggling as she gazed upon so many sights and sounds, even though you can't really gaze upon sounds. "Can we go to Piccadilly Circus and see the clowns?" "There's no time for that," said Alan Taylor, who was sitting in Polly's hair, so he wouldn't be trodden on by a businessman or eaten by a beef-eater for dessert. We've got to find Thora Gruntwinkle, and I think I know where she might be." "You do?" said Friday O'Leary in surprise. "I certainly do," said Alan Taylor. "Do you remember what I was like when you first met me?" "I remembers," said Polly. "You was a horrid little Richie with far too much money for your own goods. You was always splashing in about, showing off like nobody's fat business." "That's right, Polly," said Alan Taylor. "But have you ever wondered just how I came to have all that money in the first place?" "No," said Friday. "You see," explained Alan Taylor, "I used to work right here in old London town. I was a taxi driver, and I know this city like the back of my tasty little hand. Now, if we're very lucky," he said, scanning the street with a bright raisin eyes. "Yes, there it is." Suddenly, to Polly's astonishment, Alan Taylor somersaulted from her hair and began running pell-mell down Pall Mall, dodging amongst the legs of the pedestrians and chortling with glee. "What's got into him?" said Friday. But it wasn't that had got into Alan Taylor. It was what Alan Taylor had got into. A dusty old black taxi cab with a crumpled bonnet, a couple of flat tyres, and hundreds of parking tickets plastered all over the windscreen. "Me old taxi!" cried Alan Taylor, bouncing up and down on the front seat with such gusto that the whole street stopped to stare. "Right, where I left him 3 years ago, parked in front of the no parking sign. What a stroke of luck! Hop in, hop in." Polly and Friday hopped in. "To the butcher's district," proclaimed Alan Taylor. He turned the ignition key, and smumph, they were off. Of course, a London taxicab is very big, and Alan Taylor was very small, so he kept having to jump up and down from the steering wheel to press the pedals, and then, every now and again, when he remembered, he jumped back up and turned the steering while dancing on it, his little legs whizzing up and down on his electronic muscles, buzzing like a toaster about to explode. He seemed to be having so much fun that Polly couldn't help but laugh through the terror. "He's a-gonna kill us," she giggled, and oncoming traffic swerved to get out of their way. "He's a-going to kill us all." The other drivers honked their horns or shouted, "Beep, beep." Crowds of shoppers ducked from cover as the cab skidded onto the pavement, knocking over an ice cream stand and one of those stalls that sell useless souvenirs of London, like plastic Big Bens and postcards of idiotic-looking punks. "Look out! Look out!" The cry went up. "Alan Taylor's back in town." "How on earth did you become rich driving like this?" yelled Friday, as Alan Taylor accidentally ran over Sherlock Holmes and hurt his foot. "My passengers used to pay me double to let them out of the cab as soon as they'd got in," replied Alan Taylor, bouncing happily up and down on the accelerator. "I made lots of money that way." "Look!" shouted Polly as they whizzed past their famous sights of the nation's capital, an old chestnut seller dying of the plague, Mary Poppins beating up a tramp, chimney sweeps dancing all over Nelson's column, Dr. Jekyll turning into a pigeon. "Isn't it grand, Friday? Isn't it grand?" "Cropper in the flopper," agreed Friday, who occasionally liked to say "cropper in the flopper" instead of yes. Suddenly, Alan Taylor jumped down brakes as hard as he could, with an awful smell of burning rubber and gingerbread. The taxi spun round and round in the middle of the road. The front wheel bounced off, flew into the House of Parliament, and accidentally became Prime Minister for the next 10 years. The engine fell out and rolled into the River Thames, and then all was still. But where are we?" said Polly, looking dazedly around. "We're lost," said Friday. "No, we're not," smiled Alan Taylor, pointing the old-fashioned street sign on the corner. "Carver's Row. All of London's butchers live and work on Carver's Row," he explained. "If Thora Gruntwinkle's anywhere in this crazy city, then this is where we'll find her." What a horrible street of meat Carver's Row turned out to be. It was a place of unwashed windows and broken doorways. It was a place of plucked geese and wild hares dangling from hooks of cruel black steel. It was a place of surly fat men sitting on wooden crates drinking beer, huge meat cleavers dangling from their aprons and smaller meat cleavers dangling from their socks. It was a place of butchers. Scared, whispered Polly, but Alan Taylor took her hand and gave her a courage to go forward. And Friday took her foot, and that gave her the courage to trip over and say, "Friday, please stop taking my foot." "Keep your eyes straight ahead, Polly," muttered Friday, "and keep smiling. Butchers smell fear, you know. It's one of their powers." "Spare some change for a cup of tea," whined the wretched beggar at Polly's feet. But Alan Taylor pulled Polly briskly away. "Don't give him any money," he warned. "He'll just spend it on kidneys and mince." Strange eyes watched the heroes from the dark doorways. Sharp silver blades flashed and flickered in the shadows. A miserable butcher's dog snuffled for scraps in the gutters. "Meat! Fresh meat!" bubbled a low-pitched voice from behind a boarded-up window. "Beef brisket! Get your beef brisket!" growled another. "Candy floss! Toffee! Apples!" cried a third. "Candy flossin'! Oops, sorry, I think I'm in the wrong street." At least the heroes came to the very last shop on Carver's Row. Gruntwinkle's Quality Cuts, fine meats and poultry, whatever poultry is. The sun was going down behind the sooty brick buildings, sinking like a great bloody eye into the blackness. The evening had grown cold. From one of the neighbouring builders that there were full sound of meat cleaver coming down over and over again. "Well," Polly said softly. The door loomed over her, tall and dark and ominous. "Here we goes then." Polly glanced round at her friends. She took a deep breath, and then she stepped through the doorway. Chapter 12. Thora Gruntwinkle. "Good evening," called a lovely musical voice, and Thora Gruntwinkle stepped out from behind the counter to greet them. "My goodness," marvelled Friday. "She's even more beautiful in real life than in her photo." And she was. No photograph could ever do justice to the beauty of Thora Gruntwinkle, for she was one of the most gorgeous ladies who ever was born, like an angel who wasn't looking where it was going, tripped over a comet and plummeted to earth to walk prettily amongst us for the rest of its days. Her auburn hair, her emerald eyes, her radiant smile, she was breathtaking. "Pity about her name, though," whispered Friday. "Thora Gruntwinkle's shop was just as beautiful as she, with a spotless white counter and a pretty display of plump pheasants and partridges hanging above. Gleaming pink cuts of gammon and ham sat side by side in a sparkling glass case, and indeed, wherever you looked, there was fabulous meats to behold. Lamb cutlets, rich dark venison, thick juicy slabs of sirloin steak, and in all that it was a splendid place, and it just goes to show, never judge a butcher by the cover. "What can I do for you lovely people today?" beamed Thora Gruntwinkle. "We've got some absolutely wonderful French hens, all free range and organic, of course." "Oh, Miss Gruntwinkle," said Polly, "we didn't come in search for your delicious and hygienic meat products. We didn't come here 'cause there's an emergency going on in Lamonic Bibber." And so Polly explained all about the dinner time wars. It took nearly 2 minutes to tell the whole tale, but Thora listened patiently all the while, nodding from time to time to show she was paying attention, rather than just standing there not saying stuff. "Oh dear," she frowned when the sad story was done. "I'm very sorry for you all, but what can I possibly do?" "Man alive! What on earth is that thing in your hair?" "Oh, that's just Alan Taylor," laughed Polly. "He's a gingerbread man with electric muscles." "Well, I never," laughed Thora Gruntwinkle, shaking the tiny fellow by the hand. "Sorry for yelling, Mr. Taylor. I've never met anyone so small and impossible before." "It's all right," grinned Alan Taylor, his electric muscles sparking merrily. "Now, where were we? Oh, yeah, said Polly. "Miss Grunwinkle, sir. We need you to come back with us to Lamonic Bibber." "Me?" says Thora Gruntwinkle. "But why?" "It's 'cause Billy Williams well in love with you," explained Polly, "and we reckons that if you goes all fall in love with him, then he'll stop this lonely angers in the warm, and it'll be over." "I see," says Thora Gruntwinkle, smiling wider than they'd ever seen her smile before, which wasn't that amazing, as they'd only known about her for about 10 minutes. "Well, I haven't always longed to get out of Carver's Row, and I find a nice place to settle down away from all the bustle and smoke. But tell me about this Billy gentleman. What is he like? Is he handsome and delightful?" Friday, Polly and Alan looked at each other guiltily. Began Polly. "Oh, what have I got to lose?" trilled Thora. "Let's go." "Yes!" cried Polly. "Yes!" cried Alan Taylor. "Cropper and the flopper!" cried Friday. "To the train station. We're coming home." Chapter 13. The heroes return again. Plus there's one more of them this time. "Wake up," said Friday to himself to wake himself up. "Wake up, Friday, we're nearly there." Friday woke up with a yawn and looked out the train window. They'd been travelling all night, but now the sun, rising over the sea, dazzling in its glory, like the biggest grapefruit imaginable, emerging from its next hunt for sugar. "Rise and shine, friends," said Friday, kicking and punching the udder with his mind until they awoke. "We're here." "Already?" yawned Polly, climbing carefully down from the overhead luggage compartment. Alan Taylor poked his head out of her skirt pocket, blinked twice and went back to sleep. He'd seen it all before, but after a life spent in grey old London town, Thora Gruntwinkle could hardly believe it. "Oh, it's glorious!" she gasped as the sparkling blue ocean sped by outside the window. "I've never seen the sea before." "How do you know it's the sea then?" said Friday suspiciously. "Are you a spy?" "No, I just guessed," said Thora Gruntwinkle innocently, and Friday relaxed once more. Now the train was pulling into Lamonic Bibber's cheerful little station. But what was this? The opposite platform was bustling with townsfolk, all of them with suitcases and trunks piled high. Old Granny was there, with her sherry cabinet from before the war. Beanie McLeany, who loved things that rhymed, was standing there with a rubber doll, a barber's pole, and a cheese and sun-dried tomato roll. Martin Laundrette, who ran the laundrette, was there with his laundrette. Somewhere he managed to put it on the wheels. Who even knows how? Jonathan Ripples, the fattest man in town, was there with his fridge. Henrietta Unamore Partant was there, but never mind her. The invisible twins were there, or maybe they weren't. It was hard to tell. And every one of them had an anxious expression on their face, except possibly the invisible twins. It was hard to tell. "Hey!" cried Polly, crossing over to the other platform. "Where are you all going? With your bags and your cases, your portable laundrettees?" "Why, haven't you heard, Polly?" said Jonathan Ripples, chewing on Beanie McLeany's cheese roll, when he wasn't looking. "There's a war on. We're all getting out of Lamonic Bibber." "Yeah, it's not safe here," hiccuped old Granny, who was quite drunk. "We're off to find a new town to live in, one without wars going on." Polly shook her head in disbelief. "Townsfolk," she exclaimed, "I simply cannot believe what cowards you done turned yourselves into. Me and me friends gone all the way to old London town to save the day. We sat through Alan Drayler's atrocious driving. We braved the terrors of Carver's Row. But if you can't even be bothered to stick around, I haven't even think this town's worth saving in the first place." "Oh, really, Polly?" sneered Martin Laundrette. "And just how were you planning to save the town anyway?" "I'm not telling the likes of you, sir," said Polly. "If anyone wants to come on and see for themselves, that's up for them. But if you wants to just join and just hop on a great big train and turn your wriggly backs on Lamonic Bibber, then good looks and good morning to you all, says I." And she crossed back over the platform to rejoin her friends. "Nicely put, Polly," said Friday. "Well," shrugged Polly, "they're just a load of Jiminy spinners. that don't even know how to stick up for the forces of good. Now come on, she said to Thora Gruntwinkle. We got to get you to the battlefield and turn it into a love field before the day is gone and the war has finished Lamonic Bibber. Chapter 14. The Power of Love. Chatter, chatter, chee, bang, 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 ka-thing, whoosh, ouch. Kebab meat and entrails whizzed through the air as the heroes approached the high street. It's worse than ever, said Polly. I can't hardly see nothing through the smoke. Who said that? Said Friday. Chatter, chatter, chee. Ow, me leg. Kebab-a-lam. And who's that over there? Said Thora Gruntwinkle, pointing to a figure in the smog. It's Billy William, whispered Polly. Do you love him yet? She asked hopefully. I'm not sure. It's hard to make him out properly, replied Thora G. As they came closer to the full scale of the war became apparent. Meat was splattered everywhere. The houses were all boarded up. And as for Billy Williams' Right Royal Meats, well, it no longer resembled a butcher's shop at all. Billy had turned it into a fortress with turrets and barricades and a drawbridge with his own face painted on the door. And high upon the parapet stood Billy himself, ready to defend his castle from attack. He had a cannon and everything. Well, actually, he didn't have everything, but he did have a cannon. That much is true. Come out and show yourselves, he cried to his enemies, and lighting the cannon's fuse with a flaming hot chicken wing, he blasted a lump of goat meat straight into the middle of the high street. Come out and show yourselves, you pathetic crisps. Oh, don't you worry, we will, shouted Mr. Gum from somewhere off in the distance. This was followed by some horrible laughter, and then silence, a heavy silence which hung in the air like the end of words. Uh-oh, said Friday. Something bad's going to happen, I can just tell. Smuff. A rumbling, lumbering noise, faint at first, but growing by the minute. Shmuff, shmuff, shmuff. I knew it, gasped Friday, courageously hiding behind Alan Taylor. This is bad. The ground cracked and groaned and trembled as the noise grew until it seemed as if that was it. The whole place would just split apart like Jonathan Ripple's shirt after one too many ice creams. Shmuff. Fuff, 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 fuff. From out of the smoke it came, a monstrous bellowed out kebab, a kebab as big as a tank, dripping grease and oozing oil by the gallon. Oil by the gallon lurched slowly forward. In some places it was brown, in others grey. In still others it was blackened and burnt, as hard as iron and steel, and it stank so bad even the baying hounds who followed its wake were afraid to get any nearer. The ultimate fighting machine, the engine of destruction, the Kebabulator. There was a hatch at the front, and through that hatch Polly saw a sight that she would never forget in all her days. Gracie Ian, Mr. Gum, and Philip the Horror. Which was man and which was beast? Polly could not tell, for their eyes all blazed with the madness of war, and it was the most terrifying thing she had ever seen, even including the bit in the film where all those toy clowns come to life and start dancing around the table. You got no chance this time, Billy, de Wills, roared Mr. Gum, his teeth gnashing and his beard flying behind him like wildfire. We're going to smash you to pieces with our greasers. Faster, Philip, faster, urged Greasy Ian, waving his big brass fist. Philip the Horror turned the handle and the Kebabulator rumbled forward. 5! shouted Mr. Gum as they approached the butcher's shop. 4! yellowed Greasy Ian. Chatter, chatter, chee! screamed Philip the Horror. 2! shouted Mr. Gum. Billy was frantically reloading his cannon, but even the food could see he was out of time. He's out of time, said Friday O'Leary. Any moment now the Kebabulator would smash Billy's fort to bits. But now Polly seemed to hear a voice inside his heart, the pure true voice of the spirit of the rainbow, reminding her of what had to be done. Only love can save us now, said the voice. Shove. Thora into the middle of things and see what happens. So Polly shoved Thora Gruntwinkle into the middle of things. There the beautiful vision stood, Mr. Gum's war machine on one side, Billy and his cannon on the other. As if awakening from a trance, Philip the Horror stopped turning the handle. Slowly, the cababulator rumbled to a halt. Billy put down the cannon. Thora stared at the villains. The villains stared back at her. Time seemed to stand still. And then, their eyes met across the crowded battlefield. Somewhere in the distance, a string quartet started to play. Everything went all slow motion. It's the power of love, whispered Friday in amazement. Yeah, said Alan Taylor unnecessarily. Thora! exclaimed Billy. You came for me! Billy scrambled down from his fortress and ran for Thora Grunwinkle. She was no longer just a poster on his wall. She was really here. He threw his arms out wide to get his hands on the love. Thora started running too. The string music swelled. Billy ran faster. Thora ran faster still. My love, cried Billy. William III. My darling, cried Thora Gruntwinkle. But Thora Gruntwinkle wasn't running towards Billy. You're just who I've been searching for, says Thora Gruntwinkle, throwing herself into the brawny arms of Greasy Ian. You're big and strong, and you've got a pet monkey. Oh, Greasy Ian, she said, guessing his name instantly. Which is always how it happens when you meet your true love. Will you marry me? Aye, nodded Greasy Ian, and they put their lips together and started slurping away at each other, just like at the end of a film. Shabba me whiskers, muttered Mr. Gum. I think I'm going to be sick. Bleh, agreed Billy William III, and that was it. Confetti just came down from nowhere. No one even knows why. Bluebirds appeared, cheering everyone up through not one, but two methods. One chirping, two eating the scraps of old meat that were lying in the road. And the sun came out and the clouds blew away and the cababulator was carried off by squirrels and recycled into delicious acorns. And far, far away in Carver's Row, a single daisy pushed its way up through the cracks in the cobblestones and sat there blinking proudly in the sunshine. Yes, my friends, it was the power of love, and it couldn't ever be stopped. Not even in 1,000 years. Not even in 1,000,000 years. Not even in 1,000,000,000,000 years. Well, maybe in 1,000,000,000,000 years, but who cares? You and I won't be around then anyway, especially me. But hey, sorry, don't think about that. Think about the power of love, which makes life worth living in the first place. For without love, what is there? Just a lot of homework and sitting around watching bad TV. Chapter 15. All's well that ends good. Hooray, said Polly. The nightmare is over and the world can dream happy dreamers again. I could not have put it better, child, said a familiar voice, and Polly spun around, but the spirit of the rainbow was already gone, leaving behind only the tinkling of his laughter and a handful of fruit trees lying upon the roadside. Amazing, said Alan Taylor, shaking his head in awe. Will we ever see him again? Wondered Polly. Who knows, little miss, who knows, said Friday, gazing into the distance. And the sun warmed their faces, and the fresh wind cheered their souls, and together the heroes stood there for some time, thinking about how mysterious and wonderful and good life could be, except for Friday, who was mostly thinking he quite fancied a yoghurt. But what about all them townsfolk who deserves Lamonic Bibber in its great hour of need? Said Polly at length. I don't think we need to worry about that, laughed Alan Taylor. Look behind you, Polly, look. So Polly did, and how overjoyed was she when she sees all the townsfolk walking back to their town, their suitcases forgotten, very overjoyed. You come back, she exclaimed, in all her perfect English. You never done left us at all. How could we get on a train after your inspiring words, Polly? Beamed big-hearted, big-stomached Jonathan Ripples. You taught some sense into our traitorous heads and reminded us of the town we truly love." And with that, they all joined their arms together and sang a cheerful song. "Can someone please untangle our arms? They've got stuck." "Oh, what a friendly town this is," laughed Thora Gruntwinkle. "It's just as I hoped." "Chatter, chatter, chatter, chee," agreed Philip, horror, politely, taking hold of Thora's pretty hand. "Look, all we needed was a mother," smiled Friday. "Now he's the nicest monkey in the world, or at least in the top 20. "And that's it," said the Polly, contentedly. "All's well that ends good. The story's over." "No, my friend," said Greasy Ian, and already Polly could see how love was making him a kinder man and slightly taller. "The story has just begun. Me and Thora Gruntwinkle getting married in 10 minutes, and you're all invited. There'll be roses and music and the fattest feast money can buy. But I promise, no kebab shall be there. Those days are over." "The truth is a lemon meringue," cried Friday O'Leary. "To the wedding gardens. Everyone, to the wedding gardens." And so, laughing and singing and cavorting, everyone headed off to the wedding gardens to see Thora Gruntwinkle and Greasy Ian married in the sunshine. Polly, Alan Taylor, Old Granny, Big-Hearted Jonathan Ripples, Martin Laundrette. Well, everyone. Well, almost everyone. "I ain't going to no stupid flippin' wedding business," scowled Mr. Gum, as the townsfolk skipped off. "Shabber me whiskers, what a dirty, rotten bother this whole thing is." "I ain't going neither," said Billy William III, spitting into a molehill to annoy whatever might be down there. Most likely a mole. "Love, who needs it? No one, that's who." "Well then," said Mr. Gum, "seems like we've been left all on our owns again, don't it?" "Yeah," said Billy, avoiding Mr. Gum's eye. "Yeah," said Mr. Gum, examining a passing cloud as if it interested him greatly. "Okay then," said Billy. "Well, I'll see you around, Mr. Gum." "Yeah," said Mr. Gum. "Okay, see you around, Billy." "Bye then." "Bye." The two men turned and began walking. Billy back to his half-ruined butcher shop, and Mr. Gum to his lonesome old house where the only company he had was the mice and the insects and the black and white TV with the dodgy homemade aerial. But before they'd gone very far, Mr. Gum suddenly spun around. Billy, me boy," said Mr. Gum awkwardly. "What is it, Mr. Gum?" "Me old letterbox," said Billy, stopping in his tracks. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" said Mr. Gum. "Maybe," said Billy. "I'm thinking about going down to the old meadow to find some new pet flies." "Nah, you can do that any time," said Mr. Gum. "What I was thinking was how about you and me go to the wedding after all, and sit at the back, ruining it for everyone by making loud farting noises." "Now you're talking," grinned Billy. "Come on, Billy, me old best friend," said Mr. Gum, affectionately punching Billy William in the belly as hard as he could. "We got scoundrel plans to make and people to annoy." "Let's start with Philip the Horror," said Billy, as they walked up the road. "Yeah," scowled Mr. Gum. "Chatter, chatter, chee, chatter, chatter, chee, all day long. Between you and me, Billy, I never could stand that monkey." The end. What? No Jake the dog? Come on, you didn't think we'd leave Jake out of this book altogether, did you? Of course we wouldn't, for as they say in Le Monnet Bibber, a book without Jake is like a snake without a snake. So here is, right now, starring in his very own super bonus story, that massive whopper of a dog, weighing in at nearly 200 pounds, the one, the only, Jake the dog. Jake gets a job. Now, it sometimes happened that Jake the dog would take himself for a morning stroll through the woods to look for biscuits, and that is where the story begins. It was the kind of morning that is nice. There's some weather in the sky, and it wasn't cold. Wet kind. It was the other kind with all the heat and bright light. Just the sort of day for a massive whopper of a dog to go strolling through the woods looking for biscuits. Wouldn't you agree? But Jake went snuzzling around the trees and flowers. Who would happen to come out but a rich American businessman called Ray Mozzarella? Now, Ray Mozzarella always wore sunglasses, even when he was indoors, even the bath, even in bed, and even on the toilet. In fact, especially on the toilet. And even if there's a big sign saying anyone wearing sunglasses will be arrested and eaten alive by cranes, it wouldn't stop Ray Mozzarella. He'd just carry on wearing his sunglasses. He thought it looked cool. Oh ho! Ray Mozzarella when he saw Jake, the dog, strolling by, barking like a witch chaser. Look at this dude. He's just the guy to run my big important company. You see, what with those sunglasses on, Ray Mozzarella couldn't tell Jake was just a dog. Hey dude, said Ray Mozzarella, how do you fancy running my company for me? Woof, said Jake. I can't understand a word you Brit says, said Ray Mozzarella, but I love your accent. You've hired. And the next thing Jake knew, he was in a jet plane flying across the Atlantic Ocean. Guess you must be real excited about coming to work for my important company, eh? Called Ray Mozzarella from the cockpit. Woof, said Jake, who was busy searching for biscuits under the seats. Thought so, said Ray Mozzarella, landing the jet in the Statue of Liberty's left nostril. Yes, they had arrived in New York. New York, so good they named it twice. And if you didn't think it was full of skyscrapers, you'd be wrong. It's unbelievable. It was absolutely stuffed with skyscrapers, all of them stretching towards the heavens like giant shiny schoolchildren, putting up their hands to answer a question from their teacher, Mr. Sky. Right, said Ray Mozzarella. You see that skyscraper over there? That's just a bit taller than all the rest. Well, that is where you'll be working. Your office is right at the top on the 200th floor. What do you think of that? Woof, said Jake. Thought so, said Ray Mozzarella, who still couldn't understand Jake's British accent. So up they zoomed in the elevator to the 200th floor, and there Jake was shown to a black leather chair behind a huge desk overlooking the whole of Manhattan. So good they named it once. Okay, this job is real simple but real important, said Ray Mozzarella. All you gotta do is pick up the phone when it rings and shout big numbers at whoever's calling. That's what business is all about. But hey, what am I telling you all this? You know it already. Woof, said Jake. Exactly, said Ray Mozzarella. Now, about your pay. How does $100,000 an hour sound? Woof, woof, said Jake. Not enough, huh? Said Ray Mozzarella. Okay, 200,000. Woof, said Jake again. Okay, 300,000 it is, said Ray Mozzarella. Right, see you later. I have to meet the president for lunch, and I'm already 8 days late. Jake spent the rest of the morning trying to get the desk drawer open, in case there was any biscuits inside. He had almost succeeded when suddenly, bring, 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 the phone started ringing. Jake looked at the phone curiously. Bring, 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 said the phone. Woof, said Jake. Bring, 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 said the phone. Jake turned his attention back to the desk. Bring, 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 bring. All afternoon, the phone had been ringing solidly as the important businessmen tried to get through. But by now, Jake had dug up most of the carpet looking for biscuits and was sound asleep in a puddle of his own dribble, dreaming of a lovely poodle he fancied. At the end of the day, Mozzarella came back. How was your first day, champ? He said, but there was no answer. Uh-oh, said Ray Mozzarella. For the first time since he'd been, he whipped off his sunglasses. There was no one in the office. Uh-oh, said Ray Mozzarella. He went over to the desk. The light on the phone's answering machine was flashing. 4,000 unplayed messages. No one's picked up the phone all day. 4,000 unplayed messages, screamed Ray Mozzarella. I'm ruined. I've got a nickel. Ain't got a dime. I'm completely ruined. But what did Jake know all this? Nothing. He had wandered out onto the streets of New York and was playing with pigeons in Times Square. Eventually, a kindly policeman found him and shoved him in a boat back to England. And 2 days later, he was back in Lamont Bibber, barking like a fatty as if nothing had happened. Jake, said Polly when he saw him. "Where have you been all week? Everything's gone well crazy while you been away." "Yeah," said Friday O'Leary, showing Jake the newspaper. "Look, New York's lost all its money because someone didn't pick up a phone or something. And now, guess what? The whole world lost all its money just because some lazy business guy couldn't be bothered to answer the phone. What do you think of that then, Jake?" "Don't be silly, Frides," said Polly, ruffling Jake's soft golden fur. "Jake, he don't know what you're talking about. He don't understand businessmen and monies and officers, where they make all them important decisions. He's only a dog after all." As she reaches into her skirt pocket and brought out a biscuit. "Woof," said Jake happily. It was good to be back home. The end. Thanks for watching this video. Stick around on the channel. See you next time. Bye.